To everything, there is an end. Whether it be a quick end or a long end over months or years, all things end eventually. Some more graceful than others, and this is no different. What originally started as a build-up to a remake of a top 15 that never came out turned into a review series that has seen me tackle alternate reality versions of myself, an origin story I totally didn't make myself, and lots of really bad media. But there were some good to balance out the bad. I made some new friends that will hopefully last for many years to come, and I even found happiness after a lot of soul searching and dealing with my personal issues. Pity that wasn't showcased better, but time restraints are a pain. Now it's time to move forward once more to the future. Hello everyone, I'm David Grimm, and welcome to the Mountie Presents 100th episode. I cannot thank you guys enough for this, regardless if you supported / watched the show from the beginning, or just started as early as yesterday, or hell, even if you only got to this channel due to the what ifs or other videos on here, I thank you for supporting the channel regardless. It hasn't been as successful as the old countdowns I used to do on here, sure, but to be fair, how many of those old countdowns are good or have aged well? I kid. They did help me in terms of producing content over the years, and I did enjoy making them back then, despite my opinions of them no longer matching my current thoughts. Though, that's obviously just me, and I got no issue with you if you prefer the old countdowns instead. So where am I going with the self-reflecting, you might be asking? Well, the product I'll be taking a look at today is also based on self-reflecting. This time for what the main character did in the past, and it coming back in present day. And it's an arc for a series celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. So I hope you join me on this journey of self-reflection today, as for the 100th episode, I will be tackling the final arc of Rurouni Kenshin, the Jinshu arc. So the year is 1997. The author of the series, Nobuhiro Watsuki, just finished up the Kyoto arc, an arc that many fans regard as the high point of the series, and now plans to wrap up the manga with one final arc. So how do you top an arc that deals with someone of Kenshin's past rising up to confront him in present day? By giving us an arc that deals with someone of Kenshin's past rising up to confront him in present day! But this time, it's a brother-in-law! Wait, so okay, the premise on paper does sound similar to the previous arc, but hey, at least he doesn't have a squad of baddies to deal with, goddammit. But alright, what is the main story of this arc? Well, after 10 plus years, the half-brother of Kenshin, Inishi Yukishiro, has returned to Japan after spending his time in Shanghai and wants revenge for Kenshin, killing his sister over a decade ago. And well, I'll give Inishi this. Despite not being as strong as the previous antagonist, Makoto Shishio, aka the new Manslayer, Inishi is still able to make an impact on Kenshin through psychological means, which is just as threatening as physical strength in this situation. Like him thinking that Kaoru, the person Kenshin loves, died and he couldn't save her, though I have my issues with it, shoving Tomo's death in his face constantly, and subjecting Kenshin to the worst kinds of despair as revenge for the death of his sister, and for the most part, it works out really well, especially given Kenshin's past, which is more elaborated on in this part than the previously mentioned Kyoto arc. We see more of what he was like back then, we see how he interacted with others, we even see bits of gray within him, as while he did kill back then, he also had a soft side to kids and women, which is a trait he still has in present day. And despite him being a manslayer, he was able to find happiness for a while with Tomo Yukishiro, before her unfortunate death at Kenshin's feet as she tried to save Kenshin from dying in the snow. Hell, we even see how he handles the death of Tomo, and how that shaped him into the man he was at the start of the series, and even up to the current point in said arc. It was handled really well, and I can understand why this got adapted into an OVA sometime later. And while I would talk a lot about it, there's really not much I can say about it as both an adaptation and as a film. It adapts most of the stuff in the original manga, but with a few minor things changed, such as a lot of the lighter moments like Kenshin having fun with the kids, or the gag of him pulling out his sword in response to something removed, or heavily edited in favor of a more dark and serious tone. And that is largely because the same team behind Reflection handled this movie as well, which also means this film has the same bland and unappealing art style as Reflection, and it also has the stupid strobe effect from the show as well. Lovely! I reiterate from my new Kyoto arc video, this doesn't look intense or exciting, it looks distracting, and or it looks like someone messed up on editing. And considering my issues with editing in the past, that should tell you something. But yeah, if you like the original, this adaptation fills that role fine. But do be aware that some of the lighthearted moments are cut out of this version in favor of more darkness and depression. Speaking of depression, I really thought there would be more to this version that I could talk about. But since it's mostly unchanged outside of stuff that lightened up the tone and minor changes to the story, here we are. Well, except for this scene. Damn it, Kenshin, you were supposed to pull the body out of the burning building! Now are you gonna sacrifice her to the king of the Nilox? Also, I never guessed Shishio was into covering his whole body in black before he got burned. Well, it certainly saves the animators the effort of having to fully color him in. Anyways, back to the manga. While I don't have an issue with Anishi's psychological torture of Kenshin, there is one thing I'm not a fan of, and that's the fake death of Kaoru. I've talked about this before, but I'm going to say it again. I hate fake deaths in media because you rile up people for no reason, and when you bring them back, most of the time you piss people off because what was the point in doing that in the first place? Geez, at least when Kenshin died in Reflections, he stayed dead. They didn't pull the wool over our eyes and was like, "Psych, that was just a doll." Again, I'm not even kidding, that's what actually happens in this arc. The dead Kaoru was just a doll and the real one was kidnapped. By the way, there wasn't even a struggle to break free. He was just captured and then whoosh. Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense for someone who's experienced with kendo and sword. God, at least Kyoto's arc had Kaoru and Misao kicking ass at points. What the heck happened here? Speaking of what the heck, after Kaoru's fake death in the manga, the chapters start to drag on for a bit in terms of pacing and events until Kenshin breaks out of his funk over Kaoru's fake death and goes to fight this guy who broke out of prison. And normally, I would be okay with this since we get to see Yahiko kicking ass on his own as well as other characters having their crowning moments of awesome, if they didn't already do this several chapters ago during the fight at the dojo. Yeah, Yahiko already had his crowning moment earlier in this arc while fighting this guy who's so memorable I can't even remember his name, where he defeated him on his own even when heavily damaged and learned the hidden technique of the Kamiya sword style. And even Sanosuke got his moment of awesome when fighting this other guy with the potentially historically inaccurate camo pants. Again, these two are such memorable characters. So why do it again? It just feels unnecessary. Speaking of, though this takes place after Kenshin comes back, while I do like a mini arc of Sanosuke reuniting with his dad and all that, it also felt kind of unnecessary since the only major thing accomplished during it was that it served as the reason for him to leave the group at the end of the arc because he beat some people up in it and now he's a wanted fugitive. Oh, and I guess I'm using the second layer technique on both fists, but that's not really much of a major achievement in all honesty. But hey, if we couldn't have those, then the arc would be shorter, and clearly we need an arc as long as Kyoto, even if it has padding and blander antagonists by comparison. And no, I don't mean Inashi. Well, he certainly knows Shishio since that guy was legit threatening and powerful both in and out of fights. Inashi still does a good job as an antagonist to Kenshin on a personal level because they are tied together by one factor: the death of Tomo, Kenshin's ex-wife, and Inishi's sister. While his character is crazy and annoying at points with his constant talking and committing the Jinshu or not shutting up about his sister even when Kenshin isn't nearby, he's at least a more personal threat to Kenshin on a level Shishio couldn't reach, so he has that going for him. Hell, even his fighting style matches his conflict, focused on offense and not defense because, as he himself puts it, he has nothing left to protect anyway, so why even bother with defense? A pity that depth can't be applied to the rest of the enemies in this arc, because they are some of the most vile, despicable ones seen in a while, destroying buildings for attention, hurting the weak, and having little to no redeemable qualities whatsoever. And also really bland, since outside of their special trait in battle, that asshole trait is all they have going for them as characters because of this lack of depth or intrigue that made a few of the Kyoto arc villains more sympathetic and interesting by comparison. Seriously, I'll take Anji and his tragic backstory of losing his faith as well as being a good tutor to Sanosuke and having an interesting personality and moral over generic baddie number 4 through 8 of this arc any freaking day. Because I prefer my antagonists or characters to have some depth to them since they are also more memorable to me long after I see the product, whereas these characters I forgot about after I read the story. Hell, as an example, a year after seeing all the Digimon Tri movies, I barely even remember the names of the villains. That's how bland they are, and hey, another callback. You know. Besides, are they really needed here outside of giving Sanosuke and Yahiko someone to fight? Not really, especially since the conflict from the start of this arc was Kenshin and Inishi. This issue with the fights that have no established history or conflict prior happens twice. Once at the dojo, that's more of a half issue since with that one, Sanosuke and Inui, the guy with the camo pants that may or may not be historically inaccurate, met prior to that moment, and the second time this happens is at the island, where none of them met prior, save for Kenshin and Inishi. Heck, if you're gonna pad out these chapters, maybe use that time to give them some history, or start to plant the seeds of conflicts, or maybe insert interactions for these characters fighting our main leads? No? You're just gonna waste time? Okay, but alright. The villains, save for Inishi, are kind of awful in this arc, but are the good guys any better? That is, debatable. A few of them certainly got stronger power-wise, but in terms of character development, the most I could say that got that was Kenshin, while the rest stayed roughly the same. Kenshin finally moved past the death of Tomoe and seemed to be finally happy with his life after his rough past as a manslayer, but everyone else like Yahiko and Sanosuke, while they did get stronger in terms of power, they roughly stayed the same as characters when compared to the previous arc where they not only got stronger, but developed as characters to an extent. And certain characters like Aoshi, Saito, and Misao felt, well, kind of pointless to this arc overall as time passed. I at first thought they were going to contribute majorly when Misao and Aoshi went to go get Tomoe's journal, but that only really factors in after all is said and done. Did Aoshi and Misao grow as characters after the Kyoto arc or Saito? Hell, with Aoshi and Misao, did they show any signs of affection between each other in this arc? Not really, but hey, they do get to fight a few bland bad guys and mines. Even Sanosuke feels worthless in this arc, since the only thing he gets is using his technique from the Kyoto arc on 2 hands instead of 1, and getting constantly bitched at by Megumi for injuring his hand further. God, you were more likable in the last arc. Hell, at least you were chucking things at people in said arc. Speaking of poor treatment of female characters, oh boy, they screwed up Kaoru badly in this arc. You know how she's supposed to be the person in charge of the Kamiya school and has experience with the sword? Well, this arc didn't do a good job convincing me of that, because if she's not sitting on ass watching the fights, she's getting kidnapped and not doing much about it. At least Kyoto gave her a couple decent fights, though again, would've liked more history with her and the opponents, but whatever. Seriously, this really bugs me, especially when we know she has experience fighting, but never uses it. God! But the ending is pretty good, with Kenshin getting his happy ending, the main crew going their own separate ways, though some of the reasons are dumb, see Sanosuke. And Yahiko getting the reverse blade from Kenshin was a really good thing to see, showcasing how far Yahiko has come since the beginning of the series, though a lot of the development was power and not as a character, but I digress. But I think I've covered everything I have to say on this, so let's get into my overall thoughts on this arc. While this arc does have a few strengths, I feel that the Kyoto arc was better written in terms of character and story. It's not the worst final arc I've read, far from it. But despite my viewpoint on this arc, I still love this series about a guy who made a lot of terrible mistakes in the past and spends his life righting wrongs and also worked to fix past mistakes. It has good characters in it, a lot of charm and comedy, a lot of good twists and turns, but great fight scenes, especially in the Kyoto arc, and even the epilogue felt great for Kenshin's character as he was able to finally move forward from what happened in his past and is now able to live a happy life with his wife and son. Oh right, I completely forgot about this. Yeah, they did do another movie for Kenshin. Right, yeah, Rurouni Kenshin the Motion Picture. You know what? Screw it. Let's quickly cover that. It's the 100th episode anyways. Let's just see how it fares.
2 hours later.
Woo! Yeah! That's what I'm talking about! An arc style that has life to it and has a good and vibrant color palette. The animation for the fight scenes is great and fluid, and it doesn't have that stupid strobe/flicker effect for most of them. It has some dark moments to it. It also has a lot more lighthearted moments, making it more balanced in terms of tone, and it also helps make the serious scenes more serious as a result, since it's not always dark and depressing like the Samurai X duology. Even the story feels like a decent filler arc from the show extended to movie length. Sure, the art and proportions can be a bit janky and odd to look at sometimes, but hey, I'll take that over the Samurai X duology any day, because while their art has better proportions, at least this film feels more like the show and the manga in terms of tones and writing at points. Yeah, it's not amazing, I'll grant you that, but this film was certainly more entertaining and great to watch when compared to the other Kenshin movies I saw on this show thus far. So yeah, while this film isn't amazing, and while I am skimming it over for the most part, I do recommend you give it a shot if you're a fan of the Kenshin series. So yeah, I found a good animated Kenshin movie. And it was the first one they made. Yeah, that's not depressing or anything. Regardless, thank you all so much for watching the show, as well as the support you've given me these last 4 years. While I certainly haven't gotten as big as I did when I did countdowns, at least I can look back on like 90% of these reviews even years after they came out and say, yeah, this still holds up pretty well for the most part. Which is something I can't say for my countdowns though. Again, if you like those little countdowns, that's great, and more power to you for that. Either way, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And here's to the next 100 episodes. Who knows what the future will hold, but hopefully it'll be a bright one. Who knows, maybe even the format might change a bit. So yeah, if you like this video, feel free to give it a like. If you have your own thoughts on this episode or even the arc/series itself, feel free to leave a comment. And if you want to see more, there's a playlist on the end screen leading to the previous episode, as well as a button to subscribe so you can be alerted of future uploads. Also, hitting the bell might help ward off the evil spirits of the algorithm, keeping the videos away from the sub-bucks. Alright, that is all I have to say. So until we meet again, I'm David Grimm, and thank you so much for watching.